You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. The vacancy sign, a stuttering pulse of neon against the ink-washed desert sky, bled into the rearview mirror's reflection as the highway yawned empty before me. Beside me, Corbin, a man composed of sharp angles, draped in worn denim, his beard a tangled rumor on his jaw, shifted, a rustle of nervous energy in the confined space. Hitchhikers were nothing new on my routes, phantoms thumbing rides out of the vast American nowhere. But this one resonated like a plucked, discordant string deep in my gut. A simple act of roadside communion, I thought then, unaware it was the first step onto a path paved with adrenaline and shadowed threats, a journey that would scrape my survival instincts raw. My name is Silas. For nigh on a decade, the asphalt ribbon has been my constant companion, my confessor. There's a siren song in the relentless hum of tires, in the landscape scrolling past like an endless, unspooling film, a whisper of the unknown just beyond the next curve. I've collected strange sights, roadside oddities, whispers of lives lived between mile markers, but the tapestry of the road had never woven a thread quite like the one that night. Midnight had bled into the small hours sunk into the hypnotic drone of the engine, the desert outside a vast, indifferent presence. Fatigue was a physical weight, pressing down despite the lukewarm dregs of coffee in the thermos. Then, a silhouette against the starlight, solitary, arm extended in the universal plea, a flicker of hesitation. The hour was late, civilization a distant memory, yet he seemed adrift, not dangerous. I'd been that silhouette myself. I knew the profound relief a pair of approaching headlights could bring. The car sighed to a halt on the shoulder, the window whispering down. Need a lift? Just up ahead a piece, his voice rasped, dry as the desert air. Name's Corbin. I offered mine, thumbed the lock. He slid in, bringing with him the faint, sour tang of stale sweat, and something else, metallic and unsettling, like old fear. Road grime, I told myself, pulling smoothly back onto the tarmac. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the engine's thrum and the low croon of some forgotten song on the radio. My attempts at conversation, where from, where to, met deflections, vague mumbles. Corbin seemed less interested in sharing than in gathering, his questions probing. My route, my last fuel stop, his gaze flicking compulsively to the mirrors. The miles dissolved, unease coiled tighter in my chest. Corbin's hands, resting on his knees, possessed a subtle tremor. His eyes, never still, scanned the darkness behind us, as if expecting ghosts to materialize from the exhaust fumes. Everything all right? I ventured, aiming for casual. Seem a bit wound up. His entire frame went rigid. Fine, he clipped out, the words sharp-edged. Just keep driving. The air thickened further, charged with unspoken anxieties. Regret, cold and sharp, pricked at me. Middle of nowhere, though. No eject button for passengers here. That's when the night fractured. Flashing strobes, red and blue, pulsed in the rear view. A patrol car, closing fast. A wave of relief washed through me. Whatever demons haunted Corbin, The law's arrival felt like an anchor, but as my foot eased towards the brake, Corbin's hand shot out, fingers digging into my forearm with startling strength. "Don't stop!" he hissed, eyes wide, glinting with raw panic. "You stop. We're both dead men." My pulse hammered against my ribs. "What? It's the cops." A harsh bark of laughter, devoid of humor, escaped him. "That's no cop, believe me. Now, drive." Against every rational instinct, against the ingrained respect for flashing lights, my foot slammed down. The engine screamed in protest. Behind us, the pursuing vehicle surged forward, its siren erupting into a piercing wail. "What the hell is going on?" I yelled, knuckles white canvases on the steering wheel. Corbin reached inside his jacket. The glint of blued steel in the dim cabin light turned my blood to ice water. A gun. "Explain later," he gritted out. "Right now, lose them." My reality tilted. A simple kindness twisted into this waking nightmare. Gunpoint persuasion, phantom police. Choice was an illusion. I floored the accelerator, the car leaping forward like a startled animal. What followed was a blur etched in terror. We devoured the highway, a desperate flight at speeds that blurred the landscape into streaks of gray and black. The pursuer clung relentlessly. Corbin, a frantic navigator, barked directions. Sudden swerves onto unpaved tracks, jolting cuts across the desert scrub. Time lost meaning, subsumed by the roar of the engine, the glare of headlights in the mirror, the primal need to simply stay ahead. Eventually, miraculously, after an eternity compressed into frantic minutes, the lights behind us vanished. I wrenched the car onto a desolate turnout, the silence roaring in my ears as I killed the engine. My hands shook violently. "Okay," I managed, turning to face him, the adrenaline leaving a metallic taste in my mouth. "Answers? Now!" Corbin slumped back, the gun still clutched tight, his breathing ragged. A long moment passed. Then, haltingly, the words began to spill out. A narrative so labyrinthine, so steeped in paranoia, I'd have dismissed it as madness had I not just outrun a phantom squad car. He painted himself as a former cog in some vast, unseen machine. A government man who stumbled onto a conspiracy woven into the very fabric of power. The men chasing us? Puppets of a shadow syndicate, he claimed, tentacles reaching into every agency. "They're everywhere," he whispered, eyes darting around the empty desert. "Local cops, feds. Trust no one. I have proof. Enough to burn it all down. They won't let that happen." I sat there, suspended between disbelief and the chilling evidence of the chase. It felt insane, yet the fear had been undeniably real. So, what now? The steadiness of my own voice surprised me. Corbin consulted his watch, his brow furrowed. "Keep moving, got a contact. Few hours north. Get there, we might just make it." Options flickered. Bolt? With the gun, the unseen hunters? Unlikely. And if, by some wild chance, he was telling the truth, I was already neck deep, might as well swim for the far shore. We slipped back onto the road, hugging the shadowed byways, paranoia, a shared cloak. Every pair of headlights became a potential threat, every distant siren a jolt of fear. Corbin's anxiety was contagious. Dawn was painting the eastern horizon in bruised pastels when we rolled into a town that looked like it had been forgotten by time. Corbin directed me towards a motel, clinging precariously to the edge of things, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin. "Wait here," he commanded, sliding out. "Need to make the connection." I watched him vanish into a numbered door. The minutes stretched, taut and elastic. An hour bled away. Wrongness settled over me, heavy and cold. A decision, swift and instinctive, propelled me from the car. I crept towards the room, hugging the shadows. Close to the door, voices murmured. Corbin's and another, sharp, accusatory. "You brought an outsider? Are you compromised?" the strange voice hissed. "No choice," Corbin countered. "He drove. Don't worry, I'll handle it." Ice traced its way down my spine. Handle it? Fool. I'd been a fool. I spun to flee, but a hand clamped onto my shoulder like a vice. I was staring down the short, dark barrel of Corbin's pistol. "Sorry," he murmured, and the apology in his eyes seemed disturbingly genuine. "You know too much now." Time warped, stretched thin. Fragments of my life, sun-drenched highways, rain-slicked city streets, faces glimpsed in passing diners, flickered behind my eyes. Not yet. It couldn't end here. Desperation surged, raw and potent. I threw my weight forward, my fist connecting solidly with his jaw. He staggered, surprise momentarily overriding intent. The gun barked, a flat, ugly sound, the bullet whining past my ear. No second chances. I ran. Pure instinct took over, legs pumping, lungs burning, heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Shouts echoed behind me, the slap of pursuing feet on pavement. But this was my territory, the forgotten arteries of America. I plunged into alleys slick with yesterday's rain, vaulted collapsing fences, ghosted through the skeletal remains of abandoned buildings. The sounds of pursuit gradually faded into the pre-dawn quiet, but I didn't stop, couldn't stop, until I burst back onto the main highway, gasping for air. A semi-truck, headlights blazing, materialized from the gloom. A prayer answered. I flagged it down, surely looking like a madman, wild-eyed and trembling. The driver, a woman whose face held the steady kindness etched by years on the road, took one look and swung the passenger door open. "Trouble, honey?" she asked, her voice calm as I tumbled into the cab. I could only nod, breath still tearing at my throat. She asked no more, just shifted gears, the truck groaning as it pulled away. Leaving that town, leaving Corbin and his tangled conspiracies shrinking in the distance, brought a dizzying wave of relief, laced with the bitter tang of lingering fear. I knew the shadows would stretch long now, that I'd be checking my mirrors for more than just traffic. Yet, as the miles unspooled and the adrenaline subsided, a different feeling surfaced. Terror had tested me, stripped me down, and revealed a core I hadn't known existed. Resourceful, resilient, a survivor. The open road, my old mistress, had always promised the unexpected. It had delivered brutally and profoundly, picking up strangers, perhaps not again soon, but let this night extinguish the wanderlust, never, because out there, beyond the reach of hidden agendas and desperate men, the highway still beckoned, an endless ribbon of possibility. I was still breathing, still moving, still chasing the horizon. As the sun climbed, setting the sky ablaze with fierce oranges and soft pinks, I felt it. Not just relief, but a strange, hard-won sense of purpose. Whatever lay around the next bend, whatever shadows gathered, I would meet them. The road was still calling, and I was still listening. ' My lamp carved a hesitant path through the subaquatic gloom, illuminating a phantasmagoria of drowned stone, speleothems twisted into tormented shapes, passages narrowing into black throats. A frantic rhythm pulsed in my chest. Air gauge check, 700 psi, 10 minutes, perhaps less, tethering me to the world above. And then, a flicker. Not my light, but movement. A swiftness shearing through the periphery of my vision. Out there in the profound dark, something shared this drowned sepulchre with me. Something alien to this flooded underworld. As my primary beam stuttered, a dying pulse threatening absolute night, the cold horror bloomed. The guideline, my silken thread back to the sun, was gone. My name is Julian Vance. I chase the Earth's hidden veins. I am, or perhaps was, a cave diver. A decade spent plumbing the lightless arteries beneath continents, stretching the frail limits of breath and belief, seeking secrets coffined in rock and water. But the cenotes of the Yucatan, specifically the abyssal embrace of Sac Actun, held a truth for which no training could steal me. It began as cartography, a straightforward descent to chart a newly breached section of the sprawling, waterlogged maze. My trusted companions, Leo, my shadow in the deep for years, and Mateo, our local anchor, wise in the ways of these submerged realms. Days bled into meticulous preparation. Regulators tested, tanks filled, plans rehearsed until they were muscle memory, contingencies debated against the backdrop of chirping cicadas. Dawn broke humid and heavy over the jungle rimming the cenote. A peculiar stillness hung in the air as we assembled our gear. The usual vibrant clarity of the water somehow muted, veiled. A disquiet settled in my gut. "Julian, all good?" Leo's voice, muffled by his hood, held a note of scrutiny. I manufactured a grin. Primed, just the usual pre-dive jitters. He offered a slow nod, but his eyes, windows I knew well, mirrored my unease. We shared more than dive logs. We shared instincts honed in the silent pressure. Final checks complete, we surrendered to the water. Its coolness was a bracing slap against the tropical heat, sharpening my focus. Descending into the cenote's maw, the familiar cocktail of exhilaration and primal caution flooded my veins. The first hour unfolded flawlessly. We ghosted through the drowned galleries, our lights painting ephemeral murals on the cave walls, charting the silent architecture. Spectral stalactites wept stone tears from the ceiling. Stalagmites clawed upward from the floor like the ossified fingers of forgotten gods. 3,000 feet navigable distance dissolved behind us. I led, Leo a steady presence 20 feet astern, Mateo guarding our rear. I'd just eased through a constriction, a tight squeeze between ancient rock, when my main lamp faltered, a brief, sickening dimming. I tapped the housing. It flared back, yet the beam felt anemic. Switch to backup if it happens again. I logged mentally. Then I saw it, or the absence of light where something had been. A fleeting silhouette eclipsing the far edge of my illumination. Gone before I could truly register it. Vanished. Had I conjured it from the gloom? I signaled Leo. "See anything?" A slow shake of his head. "Proceed." I pushed onward, the seed of doubt planted. We drifted into a vast chamber, a submerged cathedral. Again my light flickered, then died utterly. A breathless second of pure, unadulterated black pressed in, suffocating, before it sputtered reluctantly back. In that stolen moment of void, something substantial, impossibly large, slid past me. A tangible pressure wave, a displacement of water that spoke of mass. I whirled, heart hammering against my ribs. My restored beam found only empty water, Leo's masked face etched with concern. I signaled the switch to my backup, my hand trembling slightly as I fumbled with the clip. The crisp, bright array of the secondary lamp sliced through the chamber, and my blood turned to ice water. Drifting with obscene nonchalance was the severed end of our guideline. Our lifeline, cut. Its frayed tendrils danced in the gentle current, a mocking testament to our suddenly dire predicament. I locked eyes with Leo through our masks. He saw it. The unspoken terror passed between us, lost in this intricate, unforgiving labyrinth. Losing the line was a potential death sentence. Matteo swam forward, alerted by our frozen tableau. His eyes widened behind his own mask as he took in the severed rope. Without hesitation, he began the painstaking process of splicing the ends, fingers working with speed and precision born of long experience, defying the crushing weight of the situation. While he worked, I swept my beam across the immense chamber, and there it was again, a presence coalescing in the darkness beyond the light's reach. Larger this time, moving with a sinuous liquid grace utterly unlike any human diver. I nudged Leo, pointed. He nodded grimly. He saw it too. We watched, lungs tight, as the form prowled the chamber's perimeter. Details remained elusive, phantoms in the deep, but I glimpsed the suggestion of iridescence, like scales catching stray photons, the flick of a tail far too grand for any known cave denizen. Matteo secured the knot, flashing the OK signal, but as we regrouped, preparing to follow the mended line, my light snagged on an anomaly nestled in the silt below. Descending, a cold dread pooled in my stomach. Partially submerged lay a diving mask, ancient, the type worn decades ago, a relic from a bygone era of exploration. As my fingers brushed against its cold, smooth surface, a violent, unseen force erupted through the chamber. A subterranean surge, powerful and abrupt, caught us utterly unprepared. It spun us like tops, instantly churning the floor silt into an impenetrable brown fog. Visibility plunged to zero. The guideline jerked taut in my grasp. I clung to it, a drowning man clutching a thread, fighting the invisible river. Through the swirling chaos, I saw the faint, ghostly glows of Leo's and Matteo's lamps, fellow anchors against the torrent. The current raged for mere seconds, an eternity, then subsided as quickly as it had begun. As the particulate blizzard slowly began to settle, the chilling reality struck. I was alone. The guidelines slipped through my fingers into the dispersing murk. Leo and Matteo were gone. Panic clawed at my throat. Breathe, Julian. Slow, deep. The diver's mantra against the siren call of hyperventilation. Panic kills underwater. Air check, 700 psi. 10 minutes maybe, if I husbanded every molecule. Find them. Find the line. I began a slow, methodical sweep. My beam cut in feeble tunnels through the still cloudy water. Visibility remained near zero. Every looming rock formation morphed into a potential silhouette of my friends. Every shadow writhed with imagined movement. And then, the movement became real. The shape, that impossible shape, materialized again from the gloom, closer now, imbued with that same unnatural fluidity. This time, the impression was sharper. A long serpentine body, fins that seemed more like articulated limbs, and eyes, great intelligent orbs reflecting my light with an almost metallic luster. Not fish, not reptile, nothing catalogued in the annals of life I knew, and it was observing me. I hovered, suspended between the desperate imperative to locate my team and the primal scream in my hindbrain demanding flight. As I hung there, paralyzed by indecision, my backup lamp began to mimic my primary, sputtering fitfully. Raw panic surged. No light down here meant becoming part of the eternal dark. My numb fingers found the small chemical stick clipped to my buoyancy compensator. I cracked it. A weak, eerie green phosphorescence bloomed around me. More movement. The entity was circling now, its path spiraling inward, closer with each pass. Air dwindling, light failing, lost in a drowned maze, stalked by impossibility. In that crucible moment, staring into the void of my own imminent end, a strange, preternatural calm descended. If this was it, then I would meet it clear-eyed. I ceased my frantic searching, stopped fighting the inevitable, and turned to face the creature. It swam into the faint emerald halo of my chem light, and I saw it truly. An alien magnificence, a chimera of eel and salamander, yet with something hauntingly familiar, almost humanoid, in the cast of its eyes, the structure of its head. It regarded me not with menace, but with an intensity I could only interpret as profound curiosity. Slowly, with deliberate grace, it lifted one of its limb-like fins. It pointed, not at me, past me, towards one of the dark tunnel mouths leading from the chamber. Hesitation warred with desperation. A trap, or salvation. My lungs burned, the gauge needle kissed empty. I had no currency left for doubt. Trust was the only option. I propelled myself forward, into the darkness it indicated. Astonishingly, it fell in alongside me, its body rippling through the water with effortless power. As we navigated the passage, faint markings on the wall emerged from the gloom, the reassuring signs of previous explorations. We were moving towards an exit. Just as the last whisper of air left my tank, we broke through into another chamber, and there, haloed by their own lights, were Leo and Mateo. Their relief mirrored my own overwhelming flood of it. Beyond them, the unmistakable, silvery shimmer of daylight filtering down from the surface. Ascending towards that blessed light, I risked a final glance backward. The creature lingered at the threshold of the cave, a guardian at the gates of the underworld. It lifted its fin again, a gesture, a farewell, then melted back into the abyssal depths from whence it came. Breaking the surface was a violent rebirth. Explanations followed, fractured and breathless, shared between us, then later offered haltingly to disbelieving officials, to the wider world. A subterranean cryptid, a benevolent guide from the deep. Skepticism was the kindest response, but I carry the truth etched behind my eyes. I haven't dived a cave since. The memory persists, those ancient, intelligent eyes burning in the darkness, the spectral grace of that impossible being. It reconfigured my understanding of the world, cracked the foundations of the known. There are wonders and terrors slumbering in the deep, dark folds of our planet. entities that defy our neat taxonomies, that challenge the very definition of life. And sometimes, perhaps when we are most lost, they reach out from the abyss. Even now, writing this, the question echoes, will our paths cross again? And if they do, will I find the courage to follow it back down, to truly seek the secrets it guards in its watery sanctum? That remains shrouded. But the world beneath the water's skin, it will never look the same. The heavy door groaned inward under Ilara's push, admitting her to the cavernous main work area. Above, fluorescent tubes cast a sallow, buzzing light. A profound hush reigned, thick with the aroma of ancient dust and cold mineral breath. Weeks she'd toiled here, her focus narrowed to the minute flaws, the hairline cracks, and time-deep stains marring these sculpted forms. The workshop sprawled, a necropolis of stone figures perched on weighty plinths scattered across the concrete expanse. Giants loomed near diminutive figures, all bearing the patina of ages. High walls rose to shadowed ceilings, lined with shelves cluttered with the tools of her trade. Brushes, fine and coarse, sea sponges, vials of chemical solutions, drifts of soft rags. Tonight, solitude was her only companion. Possession of a key, a testament to her employer's trust, granted her passage at any hour. Nothing aberrant had ever disturbed her nocturnal labors, yet an indefinable wrongness prickled the air now. Ilara threaded her way between the silent sentinels, mentally reviewing the restoration checklist for the night. Her gaze settled on a marble effigy of a woman, her countenance serene, her eyes vacant sockets. Setting down her canvas satchel, she retrieved a compact torch, a delicate sable brush, and a small bottle of cleaning agent. A fissure along the statue's neckline demanded her attention. She adjusted her portable work lamp, its beam tightening on the floor, and leaned closer, squinting. The marble felt cool, smooth beneath her questing fingertips. Her hands, usually so certain, felt steady enough. Outside, the city slept. Only the ceaseless hum of the lights intruded. A faint, cool current of air brushed her cheek, originating from nowhere discernible. Her eyes drifted to the marble woman's arm, its pose suddenly striking her as unfamiliar. Hadn't it rested closer to the torso? Perhaps memory played tricks. Consulting her phone, she scrolled through reference photographs. There, the image clearly showed the arm positioned a good 2 inches from the body. Now, the gap seemed barely half an inch. A frown creased Ilara's brow. Fatigue, she reasoned, must be clouding her perception. Turning away, she approached another piece, a stern-faced man with a flowing beard, rendered in granite. She knew this sculpture intimately, having spent 2 consecutive nights meticulously cleansing its surface. She recalled the precise arrangement of his hands upon a small, integrated plinth. Now, his stone fingers seemed to clench at a subtly altered angle. Ilara leaned in, her gaze fixed. The granite was immutable, unyielding. She looked away deliberately, then snapped her eyes back. No visible shift. The discrepancy was marginal, almost negligible, yet a conviction solidified within her. Something was amiss. She ventured deeper into the workshop's recesses, where the overhead lighting faltered, casting long, dancing shadows. In a neglected corner stood an enigma, a statue unlike the others, its provenance unknown. It felt older, primordial. The form suggested humanity but lacked definition, a rough-hewn shape devoid of features, carved from a darker, denser stone. Hesitantly, Ilara ran her hand along its flank, cold, as expected. But then, after a moment's contact, a subtle vibration pulsed against her palm. She froze, holding her breath. It felt uncannily like a heartbeat, faint but rhythmic, thrumming within the stone. Lifting her hand, she pressed it back, harder this time. The steady, low-frequency pulse persisted. Her own heart hammered against her ribs. She snatched her hand away as if burned, her eyes darting around the silent room. Nothing stirred. Retreating a step, she swept her torch beam across the assembly of statues. Each stood immobile, silent, ponderous. Imagination, she told herself fiercely, forcing a long, slow exhale. Her mouth felt parched. Returning to the brighter central area, Ilara circled several familiar pieces, scrutinizing their placement. The urge to call someone surfaced, but the late hour and the fear of sounding unhinged stayed her hand. "Focus on the task," she commanded herself. Retrieving her brush, she approached the marble woman once more. She raised the brush, the fine bristles poised over the minuscule crack near the neckline. A soft, dry scraping sound accompanied her movements. The acrid tang of the cleaning solution filled the air. Tension knotted her shoulders. From the periphery of her vision, she compulsively checked the statue's arm. No movement detected. She worked for perhaps 10 minutes, the silence broken only by her brushstrokes when a new sound intruded. Faint, insidious, not the electric hum. A whisper. She ceased brushing, straining to hear. Silence descended again, amplifying her own rapid breathing. Then, unmistakably, a soft susurrus murmured her name, seeming to originate just behind her shoulder. Ilara spun around, heart leaping. Nothing. Only rows of stone figures, some shrouded in dropcloths like patient ghosts, others starkly exposed. Sweat slicked her palms. She wiped them furtively on her trousers. She remained silent, listening intently. The whisper did not return. Clutching her torch, she paced slowly toward the room's center, directing the beam from one sculpture to the next. Stone faces stared blankly ahead, impassive and rigid. She stood there, pulse thudding in her ears, waiting. Nothing happened. An idea formed. A test. She positioned herself a few feet from a sculpture she knew well. A headless male torso, just shoulders and chest. She remembered its exact orientation, having measured it meticulously while repairing a crack near the collarbone only 2 nights prior. She averted her gaze for a deliberate second, then looked back. The torso seemed angled slightly more to the side. Or was it a trick of the torchlight? Crouching, she examined the dust coating the concrete floor around the pedestal. No footprints, no drag marks. The base was immensely heavy. Moving it single-handedly was impossible. Reaching out, she touched the cool, unyielding stone. Still. She waited, tracing the edge with her light, but observed no further motion. Standing up, Ilara fought to regain composure. Leaving seemed the sensible option. Perhaps exhaustion was manufacturing these illusions. Her head felt strangely light. Just one small task, she decided. Then home. She moved toward a sculpture depicting a pair of clasped hands and began gently brushing away accumulated dust. Her strokes were measured, deliberate. She focused on the sound, the soft scrape of bristles on stone. Nothing else. Then it came again, that whisper, barely audible. Her name iterated twice. She whirled, torch beam slashing through the dimness. The statues stood in their stolid silence. Yet their very shapes seemed subtly altered now, imbued with a latent potential she couldn't quite grasp. Her throat constricted. She swallowed repeatedly. A knot tightened in her stomach. She walked the perimeter of the vast room, verifying the locked door at the far end. Secure. It was a heavy steel door, operable only via a coded keypad. She keyed in the sequence. It beeped acceptance. Cracking the door open, she peered into the vacant corridor beyond. The security camera's green indicator light glowed steadily. All appeared normal. Relocking the door, she stepped back into the workshop's unsettling quiet. Hesitation warred with fear. Call the owner? No. Maintain professionalism. Avoid sounding hysterical. This had to be fatigue, isolation playing tricks on her mind. Compelled by a need for certainty, she approached the strange, faceless figure in the corner once more. Carefully, deliberately, she placed her palm flat against its surface. The initial chill seeped into her skin. Holding her breath, heart pounding a frantic rhythm, she waited. After several seconds, the same subtle thrumming returned, a phantom pulse beneath the cold stone. Ilara recoiled, backing away, feeling sweat bead on her forehead. She swiped at her face with her sleeve. Her legs felt unsteady. Ilara, she murmured aloud, seeking to anchor herself. Her voice sounded thin, fragile in the immense space. Moving to a nearby workbench, she picked up a small, sharp chisel, its metal cool and solid in her grasp. The action felt absurd, yet the weight was obscurely comforting. The whisper returned, so faint she almost doubted her senses, seeming to emanate from the very air around her, directionless. Her name, drawn out, elongated. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice sharper, echoing unnervingly. Silence answered. The fine hairs on her arms prickled. Her gaze fell on the nearest statue, a half-finished piece depicting a figure bent forward. Circling it, she shone the light directly onto its rudimentary face. The features were rough, chipped, the mouth slightly agape. She studied the shape of that opening intently, looked away, looked back. The mouth appeared wider now, the gap more pronounced. Leaning closer, holding her breath, she detected the faint scent of dust mingled with something damp, earthy. Tentatively, she reached out with the chisel's tip, tapping the edge of the stone mouth. A tiny flake crumbled away, and then, beneath her fingertips, she felt it, an infinitesimal shift, a minute settling of the stone. She leapt back, stumbling, nearly losing her balance. Retreating further, she swept the torch beam wildly around the room. Every statue now seemed subtly transformed. Arms, torsos, faces. None were precisely as she remembered. She couldn't catch them in the act of moving, yet between glances, infinitesimal alterations occurred. She tried blinking rapidly, hoping to perceive a flicker of motion. Nothing. But each time her eyes refocused, something was different. A head canted a fraction further, a hand infinitesimally raised. Her breathing grew shallow, rapid. The frantic beating of her heart resonated in her chest, her neck, her ears. Fumbling for her phone, she activated the video camera. Holding it before her like a shield, she began a slow circuit of the room, filming the silent figures. "I'm in the workshop," she whispered, her voice trembling, recording a desperate audio note. "Something's happening. The statues, they're moving when I'm not looking." She stopped recording, played it back. On the small screen, The statues remained perfectly still, inert. The video captured none of the terrifying wrongness she perceived. Frustration mingled with rising panic. What could she do? Another test. She placed her torch on a shelf, aiming its beam directly at one specific sculpture. Stepping back, she turned her body away, concentrating all her senses on listening. A soft, dry, grating sound reached her ears, impossibly faint, like stone whispering against stone. Her heart seized. She spun around instantly. The statue's arm occupied a new position. Undeniably, she hadn't imagined it. Retrieving the torch, she approached the figure. The stone was solid, cold, but the angle of the arm had changed. Heat flushed her face. Curses muttered under her breath. She paced agitatedly, the torch beam dancing erratically. The whisper returned, insidious, calling her name, seeming to circle her, now near, now far. The vast room felt suddenly claustrophobic. Sweat trickled coldly down her spine. Enough! She moved decisively toward the exit. Staying longer felt untenable. She gathered her tools, her hands shaking as she shoved them haphazardly into her satchel. Making for the door with the keypad, she cast fearful glances over her shoulder. The statue stood motionless, yet she felt their collective, unseen gaze pressing upon her. She punched in the code with fumbling fingers. The latch clicked open. Pulling the heavy door wide, she paused for one final, sweeping look across the workshop with her torch. At the far end, a tall statue, notable for its missing arm, was now leaning perceptibly forward. It had been perfectly upright moments before. Her stomach clenched. She stepped backward into the hallway, pulling the door shut behind her. Locked it. Her hand lingered on the cool metal of the lock mechanism. From within the workshop, she heard a distinct, muffled scraping sound. Her throat felt painfully dry. She swallowed hard. In the corridor, the steady fluorescent lights seemed blessedly normal. Her breathing eased slightly, though her heart continued its frantic pace. Her footsteps echoed on the polished tile as she walked toward the building's main exit. The air here smelled cleaner, lacking the workshop's ancient mineral tang. She rubbed her face with a trembling hand. Her shirt clung damply to her back. A tremor persisted in her legs. What had she witnessed? Understanding eluded her. Would the statues remain shifted or reset themselves by morning? All she knew was an overwhelming certainty. She could not re-enter that room tonight. Passing a small closed storeroom door, she hesitated. Should she check other areas? The thought died quickly. She craved no further strangeness. She continued directly to the main exit doors. Pushing through them, the cool night air struck her face like a welcome balm. She inhaled deeply, trying to steady her frayed nerves. The surrounding streets were deserted, hushed save for the distant rumble of a passing car. Behind her, the workshop building stood dark and silent. She remained there for a moment, satchel heavy on her shoulder, mind churning. Call the owner now? The hesitation returned. He'd ask questions. Was she all right? What could she possibly say? Report strange noises? Statues that seemed unstable? The explanation sounded irrational, even to her own ears. Home. She would go home. Tomorrow she could return, but not alone. Perhaps enlist a colleague, feign needing assistance moving a heavy piece. Observe their reactions, see if they sensed anything amiss. For now, distance was paramount. She walked down the quiet pavement, the tension in her neck and shoulders a palpable ache. She focused on regulating her breathing. Her face felt hot, and she kept wiping her damp palms on her trousers. The memory of the faceless statue surface, that impossible, rhythmic pulse, resurfaced vividly. The whispers echoed in her mind, repeating her name. The undeniable shift of the marble arm, the altered expressions. She glanced back one last time at the building. The windows were dark voids. The large steel door remained impassively shut. She pictured the statues within, standing in absolute silence, their blank eyes fixed on nothing, waiting. Turning away resolutely, she continued walking. Reaching her car, she fumbled slightly with the keys before unlocking it. Sliding inside, she slammed the door shut and immediately engaged the locks. Leaning back against the headrest, she drew several deep, ragged breaths through her nose. Her hands clenched the steering wheel, knuckles white. The rapid thrum of her heart persisted. Starting the engine, she pulled away from the curb, compulsively checking the rearview mirror. The streets remained empty. The workshop building receded from view. She shook her head, trying to banish the images, the sensations, but the memory of that vibration deep within the stone, the subtle, terrifying pulse, lingered, and the whispers, sleep, she knew, would be a long time coming. This cavernous space, carved from the husk of some forgotten manufactory, became my unlikely sanctuary last month. Its appeal lay not in aesthetics, but in the sheer volume it offered for my work, coupled with a rent that felt almost apologetic. The building manager, a man whose words seemed perpetually muffled by dust, had mentioned the structure's centerpiece, a spiral staircase, an original fixture from its industrial genesis decades prior. A curious detail, I'd thought, nothing more. I was merely seeking shelter. Now, the memory of his casual remark haunts me, shadowed by questions I neglected to ask about that helix of iron and wood, particularly concerning its nocturnal countenance. My loft occupies the third tier of this six-story behemoth. At the building's core plunges the spiral staircase, a vortex of steps connecting the ground floor to the uppermost level. My initial ascent was marked by the unnerving narrowness of the treads, and the way each footfall wrung a distinct, protesting groan from the timber, not the companionable creak of an old home, but a strained, sharp lamentation. Aged wood, I reasoned. The iron railing, cold as stone, regardless of the hour, snakes alongside. Around this central column, the walls shed paint like desiccated skin, and the air hangs thick with the faint, persistent musk of dampness. Neglected undeniably, yet possessed of a stubborn, disquieting integrity. I populated the expanse with minimal furnishings, a bed relegated to one corner, a modest work table beneath the vast windows, a sofa angled towards the entrance. The ceiling soar, the windows immense apertures that flood the space with daylight, rendering everything benign, almost cheerful. But as dusk bleeds into night, the building retracts into silence. My neighbors are phantoms, their presence inferred rather than felt. Street noise dwindles to nothingness past 10. Occasionally, the building's circulatory system, the pipes, emits a low thrum from within the walls. Otherwise, stillness reigns, a profound quiet that deepens around midnight, becoming less peaceful, more predatory. My habits lean towards the nocturnal. I'm often immersed in digital work or lost in the glow of my laptop screen deep into the morning hours. Sometimes, restlessness drives me towards the lobby's humming vending machine. It was during one such nocturnal pilgrimage that the staircase first revealed its unsettling secret. Around 1 a.m., descending into the building's core, I peered down the central void, that dizzying gap allowing sightlines straight to the ground floor. A single, anemic bulb overhead cast distorted light, conjuring a peculiar form in the emptiness below. It resembled a shadow, fluid and restless, yet no figure stood beneath to cast it. I paused, leaning cautiously over the frigid rail, scanning the lower levels. Vacant. A trick of the light, I assured myself. The ancient fixtures often sputtered, their illumination unreliable. My eyes struggling with the gloom. I continued downward, each step extorting its signature groan. My own breath sounded unnervingly loud, shallow. Glancing again into the central chasm, I saw the shadow shift, pulsing faintly, a rhythm disturbingly reminiscent of my own quickening heartbeat. A constriction tightened in my chest. Wiping a sudden film of perspiration from my forehead, I hastened my descent, retrieved a snack, and scurried back up the complaining steps. In the ensuing days, I actively suppressed the memory, yet the sensation lingered, a persistent prickle of awareness, the feeling of being observed whenever I traversed the stairs. The creaks began to adopt a cadence, a rhythmic groaning that seemed to synchronize with my pulse, raising gooseflesh along my arms. I experimented briefly with the antiquated freight elevator, a rattling cage prone to violent lurches between floors. One such journey convinced me the staircase, despite its psychological toll, posed the lesser physical risk. Perhaps a week later, another late-night craving struck near 2 a.m. The building was tomb-silent. Sleep had claimed everyone, presumably. I eased my door open, crossed the hushed corridor, and pushed through the heavy door, accessing the stairwell. Immediately, a wrongness permeated the air. The usual hallway light was extinguished. Only a faint luminescence bled down from the floor above, barely sketching the spiral silhouette. My heart hammered against my ribs as my foot met the topmost step. The wood shrieked, looking down into the core. The shadow was there, undeniably larger, darker. Ignore it. One foot after the other. My hand clamped onto the railing, seeking anchor in the dimness. Each tread groaned louder than I remembered. My breathing grew labored, ragged. It felt as though the entire structure vibrated subtly, resonating with my internal rhythm. Midway down, a glance into the void confirmed the shape was writhing, trembling slightly. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision, but the umbra persisted. My palms grew slick, my stomach clenched. I forced myself onward. Reaching the lobby brought a wave of relief so potent it was almost nauseating. It had to be imagination, stress. I grabbed my snack, then hesitated, gazing back at the ascent. Waiting for daylight seemed prudent, yet the prospect of sleeping on a threadbare lobby sofa was unappealing. I began the climb. My shoes made dull thuds against the wood. My throat felt parched. I clutched the railing again, the profound cold leaching into my fingertips. This time, the shadow seemed acutely aware, animated. It swayed within the central column, its movements appearing to mirror my own pauses and surges. A dreadful, irrational sense of being drawn towards it, towards the emptiness it occupied, washed over me. My heart pounded violently. Swallowing became difficult. Focus on the door, just reach the door. Breath came in short, sharp gasps. Sweat trickled, stinging my eye. Every step elicited a resonant groan that echoed upwards. The shadow deepened, intensified. A tremor began in my legs, threatening to buckle them, but sheer will propelled me upward. Back inside my loft, collar soaked, chest painfully tight. I slammed the door, locked it, and leaned heavily against the solid wood, struggling to regain control of my breathing. Minutes passed before the frantic tempo in my chest subsided. I found myself repeatedly checking the peephole, anticipating some presence on the other side. Nothing. Sleep eventually came, fragmented by dreams of standing frozen on those steps, the wood groaning like a monstrous heartbeat beneath my feet. I awoke at dawn, deeply unsettled. The following day, I deliberately descended the stairs in bright sunlight. The oppressive atmosphere was absent. Natural light poured through the landings. The central void looked ordinary, inert. No shadow lurked. I convinced myself I was succumbing to the building's eccentricities, amplifying mundane occurrences into something sinister. I began using the stairs more frequently during afternoons, fetching groceries, disposing of trash. It felt normal then. Other tenants passed occasionally, offering brief greetings before continuing on their way. Daylight held no demons. But nightfall invariably brought the tension flooding back. By 11:30, the mere thought of needing something downstairs induced anxiety. I started foregoing late snacks simply to avoid the transit. Avoidance, however, wasn't a permanent solution. A few days later, laundry called near midnight. The machines resided in the basement and the temperamental elevator was, predictably, out of service. No recourse. Hoisting my laundry bag, I took a fortifying breath and opened my door. The corridor lights flickered erratically. Pushing into the stairwell, a single dim bulb illuminated the top landing. The core below was a pit of darkness, disturbed only by shifting, indeterminate shadows. Was something truly moving, or was it merely the unreliable light? Gripping the rail, I started down. With every step, the groan returned, perfectly timed to my accelerating pulse. A physical pressure manifested in my chest. My arms tingled, each follicle seemingly erect. Reaching the basement level felt like surfacing from murky water. I hurried into the laundry room, cold, smelling of mildew and detergent. The rhythmic hum of the machines offered a fragile counterpoint to the silence. I loaded my clothes, then paced the concrete floor, waiting, trying to dispel the mounting dread. It was absurd, I told myself, fearing a shadow. No tangible threat had presented itself. No footsteps, no voices, only that amorphous darkness in the stair's heart. Wash cycle complete, I transferred the load to a dryer. The waiting resumed. The steady drone of the machine was almost calming, yet the thought of the return climb sent tendrils of cold tightening around my chest. Finally, clothes dry and bagged, I stood at the foot of the staircase, looking up. The spiral loomed, vanishing into impenetrable blackness above. Weak bulbs on each floor cast islands of feeble light, barely illuminating the treads. My foot touched the bottom step. It groaned. I paused, the frantic thrumming in my ears deafening. I grasped the railing. The metal felt colder than ever, biting like ice. Another step, then another. Each impact, each wooden sigh, resonated with the pulse in my chest. Vertigo threatened. I ascended slowly, deliberately. Passing the second floor, I risked a glance into the center. The shadow had swelled, larger than I'd ever witnessed. It seemed to flutter, a dark shape agitated within the void. My throat constricted, every muscle tensed, flight reflexes screamed, but the fear of stumbling on the treacherous steps kept me locked in a slow, torturous climb. Ascending towards the third floor, the shadow swaying grew more violent. A dull pressure began to build behind my eyes. I reached my landing, gasping, pulse hammering in my neck, skin clammy. Fumbling with the keys, I burst into my apartment, dropping the laundry bag, struggling to calm the storm within. My heart felt like a trapped bird. In the bathroom, I splashed icy water on my face, hands trembling uncontrollably. Gripping the sink, my reflection stared back, haggard, dark circles stark beneath my eyes. The thought of a sleeping pill surfaced, quickly dismissed. Some instinct insisted on vigilance. Another week bled away, the pattern solidifying. Late-night stairwell excursions inevitably featured the shadow. Each time it seemed to expand, its presence more palpable. The sensation of being watched intensified, though there were never eyes, just an oppressive awareness. The tightness in my chest became a Pavlovian response to approaching the landing. The creaking stairs felt increasingly animate, sometimes vibrating subtly underfoot, as if the entire structure were breathing in time with my fear. One night, near 3 a.m., unfamiliar clattering echoed from the hallway, pipes perhaps protesting the cold. An urge to investigate, to check for leaks, propelled me towards the door. The moment I pushed into the stairwell, my heart rate surged violently. The air felt thick, heavy, resisting each inhalation. My palms were instantly slick, a strange numbness creeping into my arms. I peered over the rail. The central void pulsed with the familiar darkness, shifting in slow, deliberate waves. Then, impossibly, I heard the wood creak, a step groaning, though I stood frozen on the landing. It sounded as if the stairs themselves were stirring. My heart hammered with such force I felt lightheaded. Clinging to the railing, I watched the shadow drift, not just pulse, but ascend slightly within the column, seeming to reach towards me. My legs turned to water, backing away slowly, eyes locked on the undulating darkness. I wrenched the door shut, retreated into my loft, and threw the deadbolt. The remainder of that night was spent huddled on the sofa, knees drawn tight, consciously regulating my breathing. The physical panic eventually subsided, replaced by a chilling certainty. Sleep finally claimed me near dawn. Waking to sunlight, the building felt deceptively normal. Around noon, driven by a need for empirical proof, I descended the stairs. Bright, airy, ordinary. The spiral looked like nothing more than aged architecture. No shadow, just the expected dimness deep within the core. I walked all the way down and back up without incident. No ominous sounds, no pulsing dread. For a fragile moment, I clung to the possibility that it was all in my head. But the night refuted my hopes. A dripping faucet in the bathroom demanded attention, my toolkit sequestered in the car below. The elevator remained stubbornly inert. Around 1:30 a.m., I faced the stairwell door again. The instant it swung open, the deep, resonant groan sounded, unprompted by my weight. My pulse leapt. Hesitating at the precipice, I looked down. The shadow was monstrous, seeming to fill the entire central gap, a churning vortex of black. Panic clawed at my throat. raw and suffocating. My breath hitched, tears pricked my eyes, but the faucet dripped and the tools were below. I began the descent, forcing my gaze onto the steps directly ahead, avoiding the abyssal center. Each creaking plank registered through the soles of my shoes. My hands shook violently on the cold railing. Sweat traced cold paths down my temples. The air hung thick and stale. Every few steps, my eyes darted involuntarily to the core. The shadow rippled, its undulations perfectly synchronized with the frantic pulse hammering in my veins. Step after agonizing step. By the time I reached the ground floor, my legs trembled uncontrollably. My chest felt crushed, my shirt plastered to my skin. Breathing through my nose was impossible. I panted, mouth dry. I bolted through the lobby, retrieved the toolkit from the car, then stood paralyzed on the sidewalk, staring back at the entrance. The staircase felt like a living entity within, exerting a palpable pull, urging my return. Steeling myself, I pushed back through the lobby doors, empty, silent. I tilted my head back, gazing up the spiral. It seemed impossibly dark towards the top, despite the sparse lights on each landing. The pulse in my throat throbbed. Swallowing hard, I placed my foot on the bottom step. The wood groaned, a sound that vibrated deep within my bones. A full-body shiver traced its way up my spine. My chest felt fit to burst. I gripped the railing until my knuckles burned white. As I climbed, the creaking intensified, louder, more insistent. The smell of dust and decay filled my nostrils. Nausea churned in my gut. The urge to stop, to simply sit down on the steps and weep, was overwhelming, but the thought of remaining trapped within that space spurred me onward. Passing the second floor, the shadow flickered violently. A wave of dizziness washed over me. My heart hammered against my ribs like a fist. Vision blurred momentarily. One foot forward, then the other, mechanical, desperate. Finally, the third floor landing. I stumbled across the threshold, fumbled the key into the lock, and practically fell inside, slamming the door shut. I collapsed onto the sofa, toolkit clattering to the floor. Breath tore through me in ragged, painful gasps. A profound ache settled into my limbs. My pulse pounded relentlessly in my temples. I sat there for a long time, trembling too violently to even consider the dripping faucet. The realization settled, cold and heavy. Whatever resides in the heart of that spiral feeds on my fear, growing stronger with each encounter. Whether it's an entity or a fracture in my own sanity, I cannot say. All I know is that every nocturnal descent feels like stepping into a living mechanism, the wood beneath my feet vibrating like some colossal, hidden heart, and a terrifying certainty chills me. One night, I might descend those groaning steps and find myself unable or unwilling to ever climb back up. Our escape, we called it. A weekend carved out for the deep woods. Just my brother Silas, Finn, and me. We'd loaded the car, brimming with anticipation for immersion in the wild. A blessed severance from the city's clamor, the incessant thrum of digital tethers. Disconnection, the very notion sparked a thrill. We were no strangers to camping, yet this venture promised something raw. Silas, guided by whispers on some obscure wilderness forum, had pinpointed a location far deeper, purportedly untouched, serene, blessedly free of tourist trails, precisely the oblivion we craved. The journey itself felt like a descent, snaking along precipitous mountain roads that unspooled like ancient ribbons. When the tires finally crunched to a halt at the trailhead, the air bit cool and sharp, thick with the resinous perfume of pine. No signal bars, no other vehicles, only the vast, breathing forest embracing us. Perfection. For an hour, maybe more, we trekked, banter and laughter echoing lightly between the trees, our packs laden with shelter, sustenance, the small comforts of civilization. The simple act of walking, of being enveloped by green and silence, felt restorative. Eventually, the path spilled into a modest clearing, a natural amphitheater ringed by colossal, silent trees. Nearby, a creek murmured its constant, liquid song, enhancing the profound peace. Tents rose, firewood was gathered, and we surrendered to the promise of a tranquil evening beneath a canopy of stars. Dusk bled across the sky, painting the treetops in fading hues of orange and violet. We clustered around the nascent fire, charring marshmallows, words drifting easily between us, touching on everything and nothing. Darkness descended swiftly, swallowing the clearing until only the fire's capricious dance and the distant, indifferent stars offered illumination. It was a quietude alien to urban ears, a profound stillness that bordered on the unnerving. Then Silas rose, a silhouette against the firelight, murmuring something about investigating the creek's edge. His absence was brief, yet upon his return, a strangeness clung to him, etched onto his face. "Anyone," he began, his voice pitched low, resonant with something other than the night air. "Anyone go down by the water since we arrived?" Denials met his question. None of us had strayed near the creek. "Footprints," Silas stated, his gaze sweeping the impenetrable darkness framing our small circle of light. "Big ones." My first instinct was dismissal. A prank, the setup for a ghost story, spun from shadows and firelight. But the tension in his posture, the genuine bewilderment in his eyes, quelled the thought. He wasn't playing. That gravity settled uneasily in my gut. "Bear, maybe," Finn offered with a shrug, ever the pragmatist. "Or some hiker passed through earlier, left their mark." Silas conceded with a non-committal, "Maybe," yet the doubt lingered, palpable in his troubled stare. Though the remainder of the night unfolded without further incident, an invisible shroud of apprehension had fallen over our camp. Each snap of a twig, every rustle of unseen leaves in the undergrowth sent my gaze darting towards the darkness. Just the woods, I reasoned. Sounds were inherent to its nature. My imagination, overstimulated by the isolation, we eventually retreated, zipping canvas cocoons shut, burrowing into sleeping bags. The forest resumed its quietude, punctuated only by the sporadic call of an owl, the sigh of wind through high branches. Sleep found me, but something fractured it in the deep hours. Perhaps a sound, subconscious and alarming, or merely that primal intuition screaming wrongness. My tent, a cramped space shared with Silas's soft breathing, felt suddenly confining. The air seemed thick with unspoken questions. Careful not to disturb Silas, I eased the zipper down, peering out into the night. The fire had withered to pulsing embers, casting a frail, ruddy light across the campsite. Trees stood like obsidian sentinels, their limbs swaying in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. And then I saw them, not confined to the creek bank this time. footprints circling our tents, imprinted clearly in the damp earth, large, unmistakable. A cold fist clenched around my heart. I slipped out, bare feet pressing into the cool ground, needing to comprehend. These impressions were too vast for any of us, and disturbingly fresh. Whoever, whatever, had made them possessed significant size, significant weight. I knelt, tracing the deep contour of one print with a trembling finger. The sheer depth spoke of mass. My eyes scanned the periphery, the dense wall of black where the firelight died, half expecting to meet another gaze. Nothing. Only the trees, the oppressive silence, the weight of the unseen. Retreating silently into the tent, my mind ignited. Wake them? Tell them what? That shadows had walked while we slept, based on tracks in the dirt? It felt flimsy, alarmist. Perhaps there was a mundane explanation I couldn't grasp in the disorienting dark. Sleep, however, remained elusive. I lay rigid, ears straining against the canvas, every nocturnal murmur magnified. The image of those deep impressions seared behind my eyelids. Morning arrived, crisp and bright, yet I held my tongue about the nocturnal discovery. Why incite panic over ambiguous evidence? A hiker off course? A large animal? Plausible deniability felt safer. We filled the day with determined exploration, hiking wooded slopes, seeking out a rumored waterfall whose beauty, though undeniable, felt muted by the persistent prickle of being observed. Occasionally, I'd see Silas pause, his head cocked, his shoulders tight with the same tension that coiled within me. That evening, the fire felt different, less a beacon of camaraderie, more a fragile defense against the encroaching dark. Laughter felt forced, conversation strained. An unspoken consensus of disquiet hummed beneath the surface, a shared knowledge we dared not articulate. Finn eventually broke the spell, stretching with feigned casualness. "Gonna turn in," he announced. "Big hike tomorrow." We murmured assent. Exhaustion warred with a reluctance to yield the fire's meager protection. As we prepared to disperse, my gaze snagged on the ground near the edge of the firelight. More prints, not circling this time, but leading away, into the black maw of the forest, as if something had stood sentinel just beyond our awareness, then retreated. Fresh, too fresh, my blood ran cold. "Silas," I breathed, gesturing subtly. He followed my line of sight, and the color drained from his face. "We have to leave," he whispered, the words barely audible above the crackle of the dying fire. "Now." There was no room for argument. The wrongness was no longer a feeling, it was a palpable presence. We began packing with quiet urgency, loath to wake the others prematurely, but the forest broke its silence first. A sound, low and guttural, vibrated through the air, a growl emanating from the Stygian depths surrounding us. We froze, eyes wide, locked onto the impenetrable wall of trees. It came again, closer, resonant with a menace that raised the hairs on my neck. Not a bear, not any natural sound I recognized. This felt possessive, predatory. "Wake them," Silas urged, his voice tight with fear. I shook Finn and our other friend awake, struggling to convey the urgency without succumbing to panic. Their initial drowsiness evaporated, replaced by alarm as they registered the genuine terror in our faces. Gear was snatched, bags shouldered, and we plunged onto the trail leading back, the growling a chilling echo pursuing us through the timberland. My heart hammered against my ribs. My imagination conjured horrors in every shifting shadow, every rustling leaf. Then, as abruptly as it began, the growling ceased. The silence that rushed back in felt heavier, more threatening. I kept glancing back, expecting pursuit, a shape detaching itself from the darkness. Nothing materialized. We moved in a tight knot of fear, the only sound the frantic crunch of our boots on the path. Time warped, stretching into an eternity of tense footsteps before the familiar shape of the car emerged from the gloom. Gear was flung into the trunk, doors slammed, locks engaged. Silas's hands trembled as he jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roaring to life like a prayer answered. Headlights sliced through the trees ahead, illuminating nothing but empty woods, unnervingly still. We drove for a long time without speaking, the miles accumulating between us and the clearing, slowly dissolving the immediate terror, but not the deep-seated chill. That sensation of being watched, of having brushed against something ancient and unseen, lingered like a phantom touch. What stalked us in those woods remains an enigma, an animal of unusual size, or something else entirely, something the wilderness guards in its deepest shadows. I carry the uncertainty, the memory of those prints, the echo of that growl. I know only this: I have never returned to that forest, and the path back exists only in the landscape of my nightmares. Confession doesn't sit well with me. There's a knot of ice that forms low in my gut, a visceral clench whenever memory summons the first instance. It began with an old timepiece, within which I found something that fractured my perception of reality. I am Elias Thorne, a horologist by trade, and the intricate dance of gears and springs, the steady pulse of a balanced escapement, was once my solace. My life unfolded amidst the microscopic constellations of watch parts. Then, nestled within the heartwood of a forgotten clock, I unearthed an anomaly, a mechanism utterly alien to my craft. Now, the very concept of chronology feels tainted. Let me recount its emergence. I was within my atelier, a sanctuary crammed behind the modest shopfront, walls groaning under the weight of brass components and dormant pendulums. My workbench, an island under the interrogative glare of focused lamps, occupied the center, beside a swivel chair whose every lean uttered a weary complaint. On that particular afternoon, my attention was devoted to a tall sentinel of a grandfather clock, its case scarred by neglect, its metalwork dulled, its voice long silent. I had just carefully extracted the main gear assembly for restoration when my fingers brushed against an incongruous seam at the back of the clock's shadowed interior, a small metal plate cleverly disguised. A flicker of adrenaline, unexpected and sharp, coursed through me. Secret compartments were not the usual province of timekeepers. With a thin probe, one normally reserved for delicate adjustments, I eased away the disguised plate. There, swaddled in what looked like aged velvet, lay a compact enigma. I lifted it with reverence, bringing it under the lamplight. Palm-sized, intricate, its gearing defied all horological logic I knew. Its arrangement was bizarre, purposeless by any standard measure. Unfamiliar toggles studded its surface. A thrill, sharp and almost illicit, pierced the habitual calm of my concentration. In all my years dismantling and resurrecting timepieces, Nothing remotely like this had ever crossed my bench. I placed it carefully before me, its presence radiating a quiet intensity. I began my examination, piece by meticulous piece. A diminutive key nestled in its side. A hesitant turn yielded soft, precise clicks, followed by a nearly inaudible, high-pitched thrum. Near the crown, a tiny lever. I nudged it. Nothing transpired. Another lever, positioned basally. The instant I shifted that lower toggle, the world's breath caught. Silence crashed down, absolute and profound. The lamp's electric sigh, the comforting chorus of ticking from the clocks lining the walls, the familiar metallic protest of my chair as I shifted. All ceased. Motes of dust, previously dancing in the light beams, hung suspended like captured stars. My own respiration roared in the sudden vacuum, unnaturally loud. My throat went parchment dry. Slowly I rose, a tremor starting in my knees. Habit guided my hand towards the lamp's cord, a nonsensical gesture. The light burned steadily, yet its energy felt trapped, sterile. It was as if I existed within a vacuum of perfect stillness. I navigated the sudden hush towards the workshop door. My footfalls echoed strangely, the sole occupants of the soundscape. The street beyond the door offered no murmur of traffic, no pedestrian chatter. The doorknob felt unnaturally cold beneath my fingers. I pulled it open. Out in the shop, stillness reigned absolute. No one stood behind the counter. A common housefly, arrested mid-flight near the waste bin, became a horrifying static monument to this suspended reality. My gut clenched tight. Waving a hand slowly before its iridescent body provoked no reaction, no flicker of life. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. Stumbling back to the workbench, I stared at the aberrant device, the source of this temporal paralysis. A pressure bloomed behind my sternum, stealing my breath, making my vision swim at the edges. Convinced I would lose consciousness if I didn't act, I fumbled the lower lever back to its origin. Instantly, the world exhaled. Sound rushed back, the lamp's drone, the city's distant pulse filtering through the walls, the fly resuming its mundane, buzzing trajectory. I collapsed against the bench, my limbs quivering uncontrollably. The day unfolded under a strained veneer of normalcy. I returned to the grandfather clock, forcing smiles for the occasional customer, but beneath it, the mechanism pulsed in my thoughts, concealed beneath a simple shop rag. I couldn't escape the implications. After locking the doors against the encroaching night, solitude became my laboratory. Again, the winding, the click, the lever's decisive shift. Reality congealed around me. The light held, unwavering, but my own pulse became the world's only metronome, a frantic drum against my ribs. Movement felt like wading through unseen syrup, thick and resistant. A pen, nudged from the bench edge, hovered impossibly, defying gravity until my touch sent it drifting lazily downward. Then, the familiar constriction in my chest, the graying at vision's edge. Reversing the effect sent the pen clattering to the floorboards as I sucked in greedy lungfuls of air. I began to learn its boundaries. Perhaps half a minute of this stasis before the physical toll, a profound weakness, a vertiginous spin, became overwhelming. These clandestine trials became my ritual in the after-hours quiet. Freeze, move, observe, release. The secret festered within me. Too bizarre, too dangerous to articulate to my few acquaintances or loyal patrons. How could I explain? They'd think me mad, or worse, covet the device itself. One evening, emboldened or perhaps merely reckless, I ventured onto the pavement outside, the device clutched tight in my hand. It was late, the city lights painted long shadows, and sparse traffic slid past like phantom vessels. The lever thrown, motion ceased instantaneously. Headlights became static beams piercing the darkness. I circled a parked sedan. Inside, the driver, caught mid-gesture, reaching for the passenger seat, formed a tableau of suspended intention. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. A tentative rap on the glass yielded nothing, only reflected my own pale face against the frozen interior. I backed away. The silence pressed in, immense and suffocating. My breathing grew shallow. That familiar vice tightened around my chest. Then, a flicker in the car's polished side mirror. Not a reflection, but a distortion, a wrongness that skittered across the surface. I spun, eyes darting into the empty space behind me. Nothing. Yet a phantom cold traced the nape of my neck, though the air hung utterly, unnaturally still. Releasing the temporal lock, I staggered back to the workshop's sanctuary, lungs aching, face slick with cold sweat. Subsequent immersions into the frozen moment brought recurring anomalies, fleeting impressions at the very edge of sight, a smudge of darkness flowing across the floorboards like spilled ink, the barest suggestion of a pallid form lurking just beyond a threshold. Each time, the clammy hands, the frantic, rabbit-quick pulse. I took to leaving the workshop lights burning through the night, a flimsy, irrational ward against the unseen intruders of stopped time. Was it merely the strain, my overwrought mind fabricating phantoms from shadow and silence? An attempt to capture evidence with a small digital camera proved predictably futile. The lens and sensor froze along with everything else, recording only a single static frame. Venturing deeper into the stopped time, exploring the storeroom's shadowed corners, senses straining in the unnatural quiet. The silence remained absolute until a faint scra-up, faint yet distinct. Metal on stone? My scalp prickled with primal fear. I whirled, finding only stillness, dust motes hanging patiently in the air. Retreating hastily to the main shop area, the pressure in my chest intensified to an almost unbearable degree. Releasing the stasis felt like surfacing violently from crushing depths, my heart threatening to splinter my ribs. I experimented with brevity, 5 seconds, 10, quick, snatched glimpses into the stilled world, hoping to catch whatever haunted these intervals off guard. During one such fleeting suspension, near the rear exit door, I perceived it more clearly. An outline, tall yet indistinct, its edges wavering as if seen through heat haze or disturbed water. It seemed to ripple. My hands trembled violently, breath seized in my throat, my eyes stung as if from chemical fumes. It shifted, a deliberate, impossible motion, and raw panic rooted me to the spot. The thoracic vice crushed down, an undeniable physical imperative forcing my retreat from that frozen instant. Reality snapped back into place, the space now empty, yet a palpable, unnatural chill lingered where the shape had stood, a cold that sunk into my bones. My appetite waned, weight slipped away unnoticed. Sleep offered little respite, becoming a landscape haunted by indistinct forms skittering at the edges of consciousness. What were these entities inhabiting the interstices of time? They offered no interaction, no communication, yet their mere presence felt parasitic, draining something vital from me. I tried again outdoors, seeking the sterile clarity of daylight on a moderately busy street, hoping the mundane surroundings would dispel the unease. I chose an unobtrusive spot on the sidewalk. Activation froze the chaotic ballet of urban life. Pedestrians mid-stride, faces caught mid-laugh, vehicles locked in place. A discarded flyer hung impossibly in the air, arrested mid-flutter. To my left, above a mundane blue postbox, a shimmer caught my eye. Focusing, straining against the inherent blurriness of the phenomenon, I discerned a knot of what seemed like arachnoid appendages, thin and dark. A desiccated sound brushed my ears, akin to parched whispers carried on a non-existent wind. A profound cold seeped into my hands, numbing my fingers. My legs turned to lead. The shape flowed, impossibly fluid, across the street, dissolving behind the static form of a parked van. I stared, trying to track it, but it was gone. The world swam. Vertigo threatened to pull me down. I fumbled the lever off, stumbling against a nearby brick wall until the spinning subsided and the familiar sounds of life returned. Sleep became erratic, fractured. I'd lie awake for hours, imagining those shapes waiting for me in the silent intervals, patient and observant. The mechanism now resided in a small, sturdy lockbox hidden beneath my workbench. For days at a time, I'd resolved to ignore it, to forget its terrible potential. Yet the siren call of the unknown, the sheer, terrifying power of commanding moments, always drew me back. Each tentative foray yielded only further fragmented visions, silhouettes sometimes vaguely humanoid, other times grotesquely altered, supernumerary limbs, torsos stretched like cooling taffy. Always distant, always elusive, glimpsed only in the periphery. Were they observers, or merely fellow inhabitants of this frozen stratum, indifferent to my brief intrusions? I entertained destroying the device, even held it poised above a heavy iron vise, ready to crush it into unrecognizable scrap. But the allure, the terrifying magnificence of pausing the relentless march of seconds, stayed my hand. Perhaps they were harmless, I reasoned desperately, phantoms without substance, unable to cross the barrier into flowing time. Yet a deeper, colder instinct screamed caution, warned of a threshold not to be crossed, a proximity that promised disaster. The anxiety gnawed relentlessly. One night I found myself returning to the old grandfather clock, the genesis of this obsession. It was nearly restored, its brass pendulum gleaming under my polishing cloth. The rhythmic motion was a stark contrast to the chaos churning within me. Inevitably, my gaze drifted to the lockbox containing the mechanism. Surrendering to the impulse, I retrieved it, spun its delicate key, and flipped the lower lever. Silence fell like a shroud. A second later, from directly overhead, came that grating drag. My gaze shot upward to the shadowed rafters. It sounded like something heavy, something cumbersome, being pulled across the rough wood. My heart slammed against my ribs, a frantic prisoner. My free hand braced itself on the workbench for support. The scraping intensified, grew louder, closer. My eyes scanned frantically for any sort of defense. Only a small tack hammer lay within reach. I gripped its smooth wooden handle, knuckles white. Sweat beaded on my brow, tracing cold paths down my temples. Then, abruptly, the scraping stopped. Silence returned, thick and expectant. I waited, holding my breath, chest aching fiercely, until I couldn't bear the pressure a second longer. I snapped time back into its accustomed flow. The familiar sounds of the workshop rushed in, the hum of the lamp, the distant city traffic, mocking my terror. I needed air, space. Locking the shop, I took the mechanism home with me that night, a decision I instantly regretted as sleep became a landscape of unsettling, scratching noises just beyond the veil of consciousness. Dawn brought a final, desperate hypothesis. I drove to a secluded park nearby, a place of tranquil water, whispering trees, and empty benches. Ensuring absolute solitude near the small pond, I stood by the water's edge and engaged the device one more time. The pond's surface became a perfect glassy mirror, my own disturbance freezing into concentric rings of stone suspended mid-ripple. I scanned the periphery rapidly, heart pounding, a subtle rustle from behind the thick trunk of an ancient oak. I tensed, the device a cold, familiar weight in my fist. A figure, grey and indistinct, leaned partially into view from behind the tree. One arm, unnaturally long and thin, extended slowly towards a low-hanging branch. Nausea surged through me, hot and bitter. My pulse thundered in my ears. I could almost discern a face, but it remained obscured, blurred as if viewed through misted glass or running water, retreating slowly, carefully, never breaking eye contact. It remained stationary, merely present, its attention, if it possessed such a thing, fixed upon me. My eyes burned, breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. I spun around, simultaneously disengaging the mechanism as I turned. The pond stirred back to life, ripples spreading normally. The wind sighed through the leaves. The space behind the tree was empty. So here I sit, back in my cluttered sanctuary, having unburdened myself of this chronicle of dread. The mechanism rests inert within its steel coffer beneath the bench, yet its presence radiates, a cold spot in the room. Exhaustion clings to me like grave dust. My hands still tremble when the safe door swings open. What are they? These fleeting specters of the frozen instant. It is a chasm of ignorance I find myself increasingly hesitant to bridge. Yet a treacherous, insidious curiosity persists, whispering of understanding, perhaps even of contact, counterbalanced by a primal, visceral urge to pulverize the accursed thing, to shatter it and erase its existence from my life. For now, it remains imprisoned. A full week has passed since I last dared to touch it, to slip between the seconds. Still, my eyes betray me, darting constantly to shadowed corners, mirrors seeming to reflect more than just the room before them. A phantom flicker in the periphery, a trick of the light. My heart leaps, hammering against my ribs. What truly transpires in those suspended moments? How did these interlopers find their way into the infinitesimal gaps between heartbeats? How long have they lingered there, unseen, unheard by the normal flow of the world? I know only this: they perceive me, and sometimes, with a chilling, unwelcome certainty, I feel them waiting. Will courage, or perhaps sheer folly, compel me to throw that lever again? The question hangs unanswered in the quiet air of my workshop, but if I do, my finger will hover, poised for immediate retreat. That much is absolute, because the quality of that silence deepens with each immersion, grows heavier, more menacing, pregnant with unseen threat. My luck feels thin, stretched taut. This is the extent of what I can articulate now. The unease remains, a constant hum beneath the surface of my thoughts, the persistent feeling that something might coalesce in my peripheral vision at any given second. I've said enough. But you inquired about the genesis. There it lies. And there lies the reason why the steady, rhythmic tick of a clock is no longer a comfort, but a stark reminder of the profound and terrifying silence that waits just beyond the veil of the present moment. My heart hammered against my ribs as I descended into that subterranean void. Years spent hunting elusive texts, scouring derelict attics, probing the shadows of abandoned farmhouses, sifting through forgotten lockups, had led me here. Yet this place, whispered about by Old Man Hemlock, the antiquarian bookseller with eyes like dusty amber, felt fundamentally different. A clandestine library, he'd murmured, entombed beneath a venerable edifice, sealed away by strata of stone untouched for epochs. His most guarded secret. The lure of it, the promise of standing amidst shelves unvisited by human eyes for generations, was irresistible. I hadn't anticipated the vice tightening around my chest with each step downward. Alone. The building's night watchman was elsewhere, indulging some nocturnal respite, and the ancient front door yielded without a betraying groan as I slipped inside. A miasma of neglect hung heavy in the corridor, leading basement ward. The walls wept plaster. The illumination was meager and spectral. My compact torch carved a wavering path across the debris-strewn floor. Blood thrummed a frantic tempo in my ears. A parchedness seized my throat. Coldness seeped into me, though whether from the ambient chill or the ice of my own apprehension, I couldn't discern. Onward. Behind a ponderous, unadorned wooden door, unlocked but stubbornly resistant, I found the hidden stairwell. A grunt, a shoulder shoved hard against the grain, and it grated open, revealing stone steps cloaked in grey powder. Their edges crumbled precariously as I tested each one, my light flickering over dense shrouds of cobweb and shelves burdened with decaying crates. Through splintered lids, I glimpsed bizarre detritus, shattered lamp globes like opaque eyes, tortured twists of metalwork. The air held a sharp, bitter tang that stung my nostrils. I moved with the stealth of a predator, or perhaps prey, breath held tight, each exhalation echoing unnervingly in the confined space. At the stair's foot, a low archway beckoned toward another portal, this one seemingly more ancient still, its iron hinges scabbed with rust, its knob filmed with a verdigris patina. It swung inward without a whisper. I crossed the threshold into a vast chamber and halted, momentarily stunned. My torch beam swept across rows upon rows of towering shelves, stretching wall to distant wall, separated by narrow shadowed aisles. Tomes, immense and somber, slumbered beneath mantles of dust so thick the mere proximity threatened to provoke a cough. I angled the light, trying to gauge the room's depth. The beam surrendered to impenetrable blackness long before reaching the far wall. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of volumes resided here. A tremor ran through my hands, the bibliophile's thrill warring with a rising dread. Every fiber urged me to examine each spine, to hunt for familiar titles amongst the forgotten. But as I stood, absorbing the scale of it, the pressure returned, heavier now, compressing my lungs. Swallowing felt like dragging sandpaper down my throat. Extinguishing the torch, I strained my ears against the profound silence. No dripping water, no creak of floorboards from above, no murmur of the city outside. A dead quiet, absolute and unnerving. Relighting the beam, I ventured between two monolithic stacks. The books here felt primordial. Some bore bindings of thick, distressed leather embossed with esoteric sigils. Most spines displayed scripts utterly alien, letters contorting into forms I couldn't recognize. My fingers brushed across one cover, collecting a fine film of dust that smelled acrid and old, vaguely sour. Wiping my hand absently on my trousers, I pressed deeper, the torchlight dancing from one cryptic volume to the next. A faint rustling startled me, a papery susurrus, like the delicate turning of a page, somewhere behind. I spun, torchlight spearing the empty air. Nothing. Stillness reclaimed the aisle. My breath hitched, no movement, no footsteps, yet the sound had been undeniable. After a long, tense minute, I forced myself onward, the muscles in my neck knotting, my legs stiffening with reluctance. The subsequent aisle plunged into deeper gloom, the shelves climbing higher, dwarfing my inadequate light. I trod carefully, wary of disturbing the precarious stacks of books piled haphazardly on the floor. Some lay open, abandoned mid-sentence, their pages yellowed and fragile as moth wings. My light fell upon diagrams rendered in bold black ink, geometric complexities and shapes that defied categorization as either animal or human, their outlines twisting in ways that made my vision swim. Were they symbols? Anatomies of the unknown? The accompanying text flowed in a jagged, uneven script, utterly indecipherable. An abrupt, chill current of air brushed my face. My torch wavered. Stumbling backward, I nearly overturned a low wooden stool. As I regained my balance, the sound returned, louder this time, pages turning insistently further down the aisle. My heart vaulted. I tried to call out, but my voice snagged in my throat. "Hello?" A feeble croak, swallowed by the immensity. I moved toward the disturbance, each footfall leaden, my shoes scuffing against the stone. The small noise amplified, making me flinch. The page turning persisted, rapid, almost frantic. Aiming the torch toward the aisle's end, I saw it. A single, massive volume resting upon a stone lectern, larger than its neighbors, bound in shadow-dark leather, its cover gaped open, pages fluttering as if stirred by an unseen hand. I froze, transfixed. The pages slowed, then settled, revealing a detailed, full-spread illustration. At first, its meaning eluded me. A circle of indistinct figures surrounding a central entity, a knot of tendrils or thorny vines. The jagged script coiled around the image, the ink unnervingly fresh, gleaming wetly in the torchlight. Closer. My heart pounded, a painful drum against my sternum. The book felt sentient. A low thrum emanated from it, a steady pulse that seemed to synchronize with my own frantic heartbeat. Hesitantly, I reached out, my fingertips brushing the page's edge. A distinct vibration met my touch. I snatched my hand back as if burned. A sigh, faint and dry, seemed to exhale from the very paper. My mouth turned to dust. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. Then, movement erupted behind me. I whirled. Other books, nestled on the shelves, had sprung open. Covers yawned wide, pages stirred and rustled, some languidly, others with agitated speed. The air filled with a continuous sibilant chorus. Trapped in the aisle's center, I struggled to keep the torch steady, my knees threatening to buckle. The atmosphere grew thick, oppressive, each breath laboring in my lungs. The rustling coalesced into a strange rhythm, as if the library itself were drawing breath. Slowly, I panned the light across the shelves. More books awakened, displaying bizarre sketches, cryptic diagrams. illustrations of robed figures, arrangements of bones, and flora of nightmare design. My scalp tightened. Retreat. The instinct screamed, yet a deep, resonant hum began to thrum through the stone beneath my feet, vibrating up through my bones, buzzing in my teeth. Breathing became a conscious, difficult act. No living thing was visible, yet the sense of presence was overwhelming, ancient and vast. Questions swarmed my mind, a frantic buzzing against the hum. Run, flee. But a perverse shard of curiosity, a trait I suddenly loathed, held me captive. My gaze snagged on another open book, lying on a small table against the far wall. Its cover bore a deeply incised symbol, not printed but carved, which seemed to emit a faint luminescence under my light. Or perhaps my eyes were deceiving me. Leaning closer, I illuminated the open page. Lines of text spiraled inward toward a central figure, multi-limbed or perhaps winged, its eyes wide, bulging, unnervingly aware. Dark brownish stains marred the page edges, stains I refused to contemplate. My temples pulsed with a dull ache. A new sound intruded, a heartbeat, slow and ponderous, undeniably subterranean. It wasn't mine. Each thud sent a tremor through the floor, vibrating up my legs. Some colossal engine? No, this felt organic, visceral. The sound of turning pages escalated, becoming chaotic, frenzied. Books opened and slammed shut, randomly around me. One crashed onto a tabletop with a dull thud. Another's pages blurred into a white flutter in my torch beam. A high ringing filled my ears. The constriction in my chest intensified. I realized I was holding my breath again. Forcing an inhale, the thick, musty air clawed at my throat. Dizziness washed over me. My vision swam. I stumbled back, colliding sharply with a shelf corner. Pain lanced through my shoulder. Books tumbled from above, landing near my feet with soft impacts, springing open to reveal more eye-wrenching geometries. My flashlight flickered violently. A sharp slap against its casing steadied the beam. "Leave! Now!" Rationality screamed for escape, but my feet felt rooted. My gaze was drawn inexorably back to the great book on the lectern, still open. That illustration, the circle of figures. The pulse emanating from it felt stronger, undeniable, like proximity to some great slumbering beast. Though my arms felt leaden, numb, I forced myself toward the pedestal. Staring at the image, I saw details previously missed. Each figure possessed a subtly distorted face, eyes fixed unnervingly upon me. The urge to touch the page again, to test its reaction, surged. Trembling, I laid my fingertips against the edge. Warmth, definite warmth. My pulse surged, and the page seemed to throb in perfect, terrifying synchrony. A tremor raced up my arm, lodging deep in my chest. My head pounded. Thoughts, alien yet intimate, whispered at the edge of my hearing, or perhaps mere echoes of my own panic, warped and amplified. Stay. Complete the circle. Imagination? Hysteria? Breathing in ragged gasps, I wrenched my hand away. The page fluttered, a gesture of seeming protest. I backed away, legs unsteady as a newborn colt's. The cacophony of rustling pages reached a crescendo. Turning, the exit seemed impossibly distant. I forced my legs into motion. The ringing in my ears intensified. The subterranean thumping felt closer, rising. I tried to focus on the path between the looming shelves, but the frantic dance of pages on either side was a constant, unnerving distraction. My mouth was arid, swallowing was impossible. Reaching the main aisle, I stumbled toward the door. My torch beam, caught glimpses of covers snapping shut, pages flipping open, books inexplicably tumbling from shelves. Footsteps echoed like drumbeats. My own heart hammered against my ears. I reached the door, wrenched it open. The narrow passage beyond felt just as dark, but blessedly quieter. I plunged through, slamming the heavy door behind me. The boom resonated down the corridor. Leaning against the cool stone wall, I fought to regulate my breathing, my hand shaking so violently the torch beam jittered wildly. My jaw ached from clenching. Coherent thought fractured. Survival instinct took over. Focus on leaving. I turned, heading to the stairs, my body feeling frail, drained. My knees threatened to give way, but I pressed on, each upward step an eternity. Faint rustling pursued me from behind the door, but mercifully, it did not follow further. I ascended into the relative normality of the upper corridor, pushing through the heavy wooden door I'd first breached, pulling it shut. Still trembling, shirt plastered to my back with cold sweat, I paused, gulping shallow breaths, then hurried toward the building's entrance. Emerging onto the ground floor, the hall remained deserted, bathed in the weak gray light filtering through grimy windows. The night watchman was still absent. I pushed through the front door and out into the embrace of the night. Cool air struck my face, a welcome shock. My lungs greedily drank it in, purging the stale, charged atmosphere of the depths. I stood there, shivering, thoughts churning in a chaotic vortex. The street's quiet felt artificial, fragile. Reaching my car, my hands fumbled with the keys. Inside, I gripped the steering wheel, staring blankly ahead, pulse still galloping, lips numb. What now? Home? Sleep seemed a remote possibility. Old Man Hemlock's tale was horribly true, a reality far stranger and more menacing than I could have conceived. That pressure lingered in my chest, an echo of the pulsing pages. I rolled down the window, letting the night air scour my face. Cursed? Alive? Sentient? I lack the words, the framework, for what those books were. I only know I have never felt a space respire as that library did. Never touched parchment that seemed to possess a heartbeat. Never known a silence so profound it begged to be shattered by a scream. Will I return? Part of me, the obsessive collector, the seeker of the arcane, yearns to. Another part recoils, urging me to bury the memory, pretend the hidden library never existed. Yet the phantom rustle of pages persists in my mind's ear. The unsettling energy remains, a subtle vibration beneath my skin. Curiosity? Or has some fragment of that place embedded itself within me? I cannot say. Driving away, I refused to look back, yet scanned the rearview mirror constantly, half expecting some shadowed form to coalesce behind me, to slither from my own shadow. Nothing appeared. Not yet.